Randy, we've got a problem.
What?
They go.
Reality's here. He's trying to crash the party. Reality? Who let him in?
You're sad that people are mean? Well, I'm sorry. The world isn't one big liberal arts college campus.
I don't have an agenda. Like, I want people to do something. I need them to do something. I want them to avoid irrationality.
I guess what interests me is just like what interests everybody else. It's just sort of what feels real.
That was totally wicked!
Wake up. It's the morning time. 9 o'clock Central, 10 o'clock Eastern. I realize I got to start doing that now because I say the 9 and like people go off Eastern time, all right? I need to get that in my head now. It's Eastern time or nothing.
Central time is lame, except it's better, but
we must accommodate to the majority, and at this point, it's 9:01 Central, but 10:01 Eastern on this September 24th. That's a Thursday. How's everyone doing this morning? I appreciate you for tuning in particular. I know you have a choice of where to get your morning news from and your morning community and your morning family building from, and we appreciate you doing it with us every single morning here on Real News, realnewsradio.live, realnewsradio.live, central landing page for all real news related things. Listen, we have a somewhat shortened version of the show this morning. We're always moving and shaking over here. We always have things we needed to get to. We always have things on the docket agenda we have to accomplish. So with that being said, let me quickly do Greatest Audience in the Nation Appreciation segment. What are you into? What philosophy you're reading? What are you struggling with? What do you need prayer concerns for? What do you need help with? All stuff like that. How you been? You need encouragement for something? You want to celebrate a win, a victory? You want to, just do some praise, some shout out? Let us know in the comment section, whatever comment section you so happen to be watching from, whether that's YouTube, Facebook, Twitch. I have the unified chat going right here, meaning regardless of where you comment, we will be able to see your comments and let us know. Speaking of, we have Eric in there, Jessica's in there, Kelly's in there saying, hello, good morning, Real News fam. How y'all doing? Also, Sean has this really cool thing on the left side of the screen here where you can actually see other people's comments. I think that's a baller thing. It just, really helps keep people engaged and sort of creates this, sort of a shared experience with everyone. You know what I mean?
Yeah, shared experience across platforms too. So like if you're like watching Twitch by yourself, because a lot of people watch on Facebook, you can still chat with the other people by watching the screen. There you go. So like, because the people in Facebook, they'll be in this chat. YouTube will be in this chat. And then you're all part of the show too.
Yeah, man.
You're all like cool. Little contributors. You're not little. You're all big contributors to our show.
And that's that stream you're seeing on the left. And when I say unified chat, that's what it's pulling from as well. So you're seeing chats come from YouTube, Twitch, everything else that Sean just explained. All right, quickly again, real quick here. Make sure to help out our buddy Jessica. Uncle Joe needs help, hit by a car on August 25th. The GoFundMe is sitting there in the links. We've been over that the last couple of days here. I'm going to keep pushing this out there until I hear some, some kind of positive response. Or basically, I guess until Uncle Joe doesn't need our help anymore, man. I'm telling you, broken hip, permanent pins, completely torn rotator cuffs, and he lost his job, doesn't have health insurance to cover right now. So his body was physically struck by an SUV, by another car. I mean, not a traffic collision, but he was physically hit by another car. So the guy needs some help. Jessica needs some help, some encouragement, some praise. Let her know you got her back. Real News family, do what you do. Like, share, do all those things. Help with the money. That's what they really right now, some financial contribution. That GoFundMe is linked in the show notes, as all the stories are linked in the show notes every single morning. The story we're getting to today is Breonna Taylor. Let me just make mention of a few local stories here because we need to cover this Breonna Taylor story, which will take about a full half hour. Breonna Taylor story is one that's now in the news currently because we had the grand jury indictment come down yesterday. Before we get to that, though, the few local stories I'm going to hit tomorrow, I just want to make you all aware of. The Knox commissioner, one of the Knox County commissioners who is on board voting to dissolve the power, or at least limit the power of the health board. He was one of the individuals that spoke the other night about the fact that he and his family actually came down with COVID-19, saying like, look, this is a very real thing. It is out here. All right, we need to take this seriously. We need to take the virus seriously. But at the same time, this aspect of government overreach is too much. It's too much. I think it's just a very interesting way to kind of prove the point there of a guy who him and his family suffered through it. About 5 or 6 other people. He's a libertarian pastor in the area. About 5 or 6 other people from his church suffered through it as well. He was in the hospital for about a week or so.
Yeah, he spoke at the actual county commission meeting, and his father-in-law, he said, was in the hospital, and he said he spent like 2 days in the hospital.
Yeah. So I thought just
he's like, it's not the flu. You know, it's a little bit. That was the big quote from him. If I was writing a story, I'd say county commissioner says COVID-19 serious and not the flu.
So anyways, man, all I'm saying is, be safe out there. Take care of yourself. Read that story if you want to get a little bit perspective and just understand it's okay to sort of bifurcate these two topics and understand that we're talking about government overreach. And at the same time, you can still treat this virus seriously. I don't think those are mutually exclusive, right? But the second story here locally, I think is just funny one to bring up. Somebody in the Board of Health members said that they felt threatened by one of these Glenn Jacob videos going around, saying it was an ominous video. I've seen the video. I don't know what.
Like them personally, like that's a little self-aggrandizing, don't you think? It's like that video was not made just for you. You know,
your name wasn't mentioned in that, right? Last local story here is Governor.
Threatened and scared, and I'm shaking.
Last local story here is that the governor's mask executive order is set to end next week, and the article indicates that it will not be renewed. All right, so there's the local stories here. Let's get to the national stories at hand, because I'm sure this is what everyone wants to hear about as well. Oh, yeah, one last thing here, too. I saw Shine link this in the show notes.
Yeah, I was just going to say, do we want to talk about this Supreme Court I volunteer link that people can check out?
Yeah. When Sean and I talk all the time about, how to make movements, right? How to impact your area, how to impact things that are relevant to you. This is one of these things we're talking about. So the company we work for, Americans for Prosperity, makes it that easy to get in touch with your legislators. All right. So if you support the idea of replacing the Supreme Court justice with someone who I would say, and I think Americans for Prosperity would agree, would be an originalist, at least a textualist at a minimum, someone that's going to do what a justice should do and not legislate from the bench, sign that I-vol. When you sign that I-vol and you put accurate information in, it goes to your legislators. Senate, House, goes to those legislators and says, on behalf of me signing this right now, I support you voting for such and such. I guess House it wouldn't go to, because House wouldn't matter in this.
It's the Senate, and like just a rundown of what you'd be putting your name on. It says, I want a Supreme Court justice nominee that would respect the Constitution, protect fundamental rights, defend separation of powers, interpret the law as written, and not legislate from the bench. There's a little bit more in there, but that's the heart of it. So, like, if you want to make your voice heard on what kind of nominee, and that you want a nominee now, probably. It doesn't say that explicitly, but that's a little bit implied, right? Like if it's top of mind for you right now. So I don't want to speak for Americans for Prosperity, but I think that's part of it too. So if you want to have a Supreme Court nominee now and you want it to be of that particular criteria, I'll put the link in the description again. And let's send Marsha Blackburn and Lamar Alexander some emails. Yeah. Maybe you've never emailed them before. And this is an easy little gateway topic because you know about the Supreme Court. You know what you want. You know what you don't want. Might as well send them an email. It's good for you. It's good for the Constitution. It's good for the Republic to send them emails.
Yeah,
Get involved.
If you don't live in our state, sign the thing. It's nationwide, right? If you live in another state, Jessica lives in Pennsylvania, sign it up there in Pennsylvania. I mean, if you agree with it, if you don't agree with it, don't sign it. Let us convince you of that for sure. But if you agree with the stance, agree with the principles, sign the thing, send the letter of support to your legislators. And for those in Tennessee, those senators who have already expressed, Lamar and Marsha both have said, yeah, we're gonna vote, no problem. Well, send it just as a show of support. Just as a show of support so they know what they're walking into. All right, about 20 minutes left in the program here. We have to get out right at the bottom of the hour, unfortunately. Jessica just said, too, thanks about Uncle Joe, by the way. She's saying thanks to Kelly for keeping him in your prayers. Apparently, Uncle Joe got out of the house yesterday. Her cousin got him out of the house yesterday, took him to his farmer's market. He really enjoyed himself. So good show of some encouragement right there. Show a little praise right there. That's awesome. Quick recovery we hope for. Breonna Taylor, national story. RealNewsRadio.live, RealNewsRadio.live. Check it out there. YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, all that. National story section. Let me just go straight through this. For the quick TLDR, as the too long didn't read, for those that don't know the Breonna Taylor story, pretty much everyone does. If you don't, here's the story. Breonna Taylor was a 26-year-old woman who was fatally shot by Louisville Metro police officers Jonathan Mattingly, Brett Hankison, and Miles Cosgrove on March 13th, 2020. March 13th, 2020. That date's important for something I'll bring up later on. The officers entered her apartment in Louisville, Kentucky, executing a search warrant. What was under some controversy as to whether it was a no-knock warrant or not. Initially, it was applied for as a no-knock warrant, and then apparently later on in the process was altered to not a no-knock warrant, an announced warrant. There's still some discrepancy about that. Doesn't matter. Going forward, the officers knocked before entry, but how the officers announced their identity before forcing entry was in dispute. What they're talking about there is there were some eyewitness accounts that say that they did hear the police, at least on one occasion, say, knock, 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 police. That's what they mean, no-knock warrant. No-knock warrants are exactly what they sound. They don't knock. They don't announce themselves. Typically, I would say Fourth Amendment requires, but maybe it's not a Fourth Amendment requirement, at least normal requirement is that if a police is to operate or execute a warrant, search warrant, and arrest warrant, they have to knock and announce their presence. They have to say, knock, 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 I am an officer of the law. I'm a police officer. I'm a sheriff, blah, blah, blah. I'm here for such and such purpose. In this particular situation, there's some discrepancy as to what the eyewitnesses heard or didn't hear going forward. Taylor's boyfriend, Breonna Taylor, the individual that died, his name's Kenneth Walker. He fired a gun at officers he believed to be intruders. This is typically how some of these situations happened. I'm going to bring up this other name, Duncan Limp. We'll get to him in a second. Very similar situation that happened down there. Kenneth Walker thought that there was intruders coming into his house because in a no-knock warrant, how would you know the distinction? How would you know? If someone's just coming in and busting down the front door, I don't know if they're police officers, man. How would I know if they're police officers? Unless they announce that they're police officers. So a gun was fired. Over 20 shots were return fired. 20 shots were return fired. Taylor was shot 5 times, according to her death certificate. And Mattingly, one of the officers, was injured in gunfire from the return fire that Kenneth Walker fired. Now, I've heard stories that Kenneth Walker just fired a single shot. I don't know. I don't know if that part matters. Now, yesterday, what we heard come down, here's the grand jury indictment, this CNBC story. A grand jury on Wednesday, a grand jury. One more time. Pause for dramatic effect. A grand jury. Important later. On Wednesday, indicted a former Louisville cop, Sergeant Hankison, on wanton endangerment charges connected to the police raid that led to the killing of Breonna Taylor. But he was not charged with any crimes related to her death. How does that work? The wanton endangerment charges came from firing shots into the adjacent apartment. This officer, who fired 10 shots during the raid, only was charged for having fired shots that ended up in the neighboring apartment to Taylor's home, not into her residence. 2 other officers involved in the raid on Taylor's homes, Officers Cosgrove and Mattingly, were not criminally charged by the grand jury. I keep stressing grand jury because there is such a low threshold. The threshold normally for grand juries is probable cause, meaning if you want to get it past the grand jury to indict these officers on charges, you just have to show a minimal showing of probable cause that some crime was committed by the officers. That is exceedingly important to the entirety of the story and what happened yesterday. I don't want to hide the ball too much here anymore, but as frustrating as it is, the point I'm trying to make today is that the system worked exactly as it was designed to work yesterday. If that frustrates you, as I'm making the point that it probably should frustrate you, make sure you direct your attention to the proper outlets and the proper avenues as of today. There was no strange unannounced motivation or animus going on yesterday. There was no wild conspiracy theory. This wasn't a sense of injustice. This is exactly how the justice system is currently designed to operate. I know that frustrates all of you, and it does me as well. But the reasons why it should frustrate us are so complex, it will take a very long time to unpack them properly. Let me get back. An attorney for Breonna Taylor's family, his name's Ben Crump, he condemned the lack of charges yesterday related to Taylor's death, saying, quote, Jefferson County grand jury indicts former OFC. this officer, with 3 counts of wanton endangerment in the first degree for bullets that went into other apartments, but nothing for the murder of Breonna Taylor. This is outrageous and offensive. I understand the sentiment entirely. He says if Hankinson's behavior was wanton endangerment to people in neighboring apartments, then it should have been wanton endangerment in Breonna Taylor's apartment too. In fact, it should have been ruled wanton murder. Possibly, sure. But it was a grand jury. Okay, let me pull back just here one more time and try and prove this point yet again. The point I'm trying to prove is, please do not be misled over the next couple of days here. Please let us have that conversation that we should have had at the beginning of the George Floyd thing. Let us direct our conversations in a nuanced manner to the things that can and should be changed in this system, because nothing about the system yesterday operated as it was not intended to. That was a convoluted way to say yet one more time, the situation that came down from the grand jury yesterday is exactly what everyone was expecting. Do you want to know why 3 days ahead of time buildings were being boarded up? Government-run offices were being boarded up. They were shutting down streets 24 hours ahead of time because everybody knew this was going to be the outcome. At least those in the know knew this was going to be the outcome. So over the next couple of days here, as much as we possibly can, from the very beginning of the kneeling controversy with the NFL, from Kaepernick started doing this, I said then, if you want to make a point, don't come out here and just kneel to some random ambiguous cause. People can't follow that. You can't track that. You don't know what the end goal is. I don't know what your motivation is. What are you hoping to change? If you really want to do stuff, if something like this happens, unfurl a 12-foot banner behind you that cites the exact statute that you want to change and kneel in front of that, man. Make a purpose out of it. Make a cause out of it. Duncan Limp. Here's a story from Reason. There's a story. Maryland man killed in no-knock SWAT raid was shot while asleep, family says. I'm trying to prove the point right now. There was not a strange motivation. There was no racial animus involved yesterday. The story that came down. There's probably a problem with no-knock warrants in general. There may be a problem with militarization of police forces. There might be a problem with the strong overreach and the amount of leeway that officers have. Maybe these are the conversations we should be having. Maybe we should be going back thousands of years into historical precedent to figure out how we got where we are right now.
And I'd say, too, there's probably a very emotional and not legal reasoning understanding of this story amongst the public at large. You know what I mean? And there's a sense of people in the public in Louisville who don't want justice for Breonna Taylor. They want revenge for Breonna Taylor. And our legal system doesn't lend very well to that. You know? You got to have, there's so many different people involved in a charge, conviction, and then incarceration of a human being. There's so many different legal processes, all the different people in authority would have in that situation, that you can't just do it by revenge. You just can't. At least the way the system is right now. And thank goodness for that. I mean, thank God for that. That would be the worst.
Daniel Herrera on Facebook, by the way, our resident sort of attorney here with the Real News family. By the way, quick plug for Herrera, man. If you all have a legal concern of any nature, I'll explain in a second, of any nature at all, and you're in the Knoxville area, reach out to Daniel Herrera. I do not know, I say this sincerely, I do not know a better man that I could suggest to you, that I could recommend. And I'll tell you this right now, if he can't handle your problem legally, if it's not within the scope of what he practices right now, he will give you one of the best recommendations, I believe, in the area. I would trust almost nobody, aside from maybe some of the lawyers that I worked for, one of the judges that I clerked for, something. There would be very few people I would trust in the Knoxville area with my legal concern before I would trust that boy Daniel, man. Daniel, supreme intellect, he knows what he's doing. Reach out to him. Great dude of law. He says this in Facebook. It's my understanding that federal law, Supreme Court of the United States, requires a knock and announce of law enforcement. They do not have to under certain circumstances if the evidence would be destroyed or if there's a danger to life of the officer. However, While knock and announce is required, there is also no minimum time established from when the knock is announced and when the door is kicked in. You understand what he's saying there? There's no minimum time to where I could say, police, and then kick immediately. Police and kick. Most of the time, law enforcement will announce milliseconds before the door is kicked in, he says, which in the heat of the moment, you know what I'm saying? Back to what I was saying before here, Duncan Lemp. Lawyers for the family of a young Maryland man killed during an early morning raid last week say officers opened fire on him while he was sleeping. Now, that last week was March. This Reason article came out March 16th. I told y'all before when we were going through the notes here, the Breonna Taylor situation, the reason why I kept stressing that date of March 13th is because a few days later, we have a similar situation in Maryland. But I would venture to say that most, if not the overwhelming majority of the people that are talking about Breonna Taylor today do not know this other name. And I'm not going to go down that road. They don't know the other name because they're not focusing on the right situation. They're not focusing on the right issues. We're dividing ourselves among ourselves. The Montgomery Police Department, back to the story, said Friday that the 21-year-old Duncan Lemp was shot after he confronted officers executing a search warrant on his family's home for alleged firearm offenses. Now, Lemp's family, conversely, says that the young man was asleep in his bed while police officers opened fire from outside, killing him and wounding his girlfriend. It's a little bit worse than that, actually. The Lemp family attorneys, oh my goodness, what is happening? Sorry. The Lemp family attorneys. I'm getting a spam call, buddy. My bad. The Lemp family attorneys.
You're doing great, Grant, dude. Hasn't since COVID hit, like the spam calls have been nonstop. I've gotten to where I don't even answer my personal cell phone anymore. Like, so if you call hopefully, like, not many people have my personal cell phone number, but if you do and you call, just leave a voicemail because I'm not answering. Because like, they're not even calling from 188 numbers anymore. They call from, like, Maryville and Oak Ridge and Knoxville and stuff, and I'm like, stop.
And I just realized what time it is, too, man. I'm going way long with this. Let's just do this, okay? Just check out the Duncan Lemp story. Understand that a very similar situation, if not arguably the exact same situation, happened in Maryland. This guy was sleeping next to his pregnant girlfriend. They shot him, killed him. She had to stay in the same room with his body for over an hour while they assessed the situation. He was asleep. Sean, do this for me real quick, though. I just want to play this video if we can. And it's a CNN embedded thing, so you're probably going to have to let it play through the I don't know, the commercial first or something, but it's in the national story section. It's a little bit down. It says, pay very careful attention to the word attorney the attorney general uses here. It's that CNN clip says Kentucky AG explains why no further charges in Breonna Taylor case. Now, while Sean's pulling this up, again, the point I'm trying to make here is that there's a distinctly different legal standard for officers operating within the scope of their employment. That distinction, in my opinion, should be the focus of our conversation over the next few months, especially over the next few days. As unfortunate as it sounds, one more time, the system worked exactly as it was designed to work yesterday. If you don't like that fact, and I'm arguing you probably should not like that fact, then let's start having those very difficult conversations necessary to change those circumstances. Let's start talking about whether and to what extent no-knock warrants should be utilized or even justified at all. Let's start having conversations about why law enforcement officers are held to an entirely different legal standard. Let's educate ourselves on how society arrived at the system of law we currently have after thousands of years of common law and precedent. And remember, as I'm playing this clip right now, as Shine's about to play this clip, a grand jury was unable to indict on anything more than wanton endangerment. Play this clip real quick.
During the last 6 months, we've all heard mention of possible charges that could be brought in this case. It's important to understand that all the charges that have been mentioned have specific meanings and ramifications. Criminal homicide encompasses the taking of a life by another. While there are 6 possible homicide charges under Kentucky law, these charges are not applicable to the facts before us because our investigation showed, and the grand jury agreed, that Mattingly and Cosgrove were justified in the return of deadly fire after having been fired upon by Kenneth Walker. Let me state that again. According to Kentucky law, the use of force by Mattingly and Cosgrove was justified to protect themselves. This justification bars us from pursuing criminal charges in Miss Breonna Taylor's death. The truth is now before us. The facts have been examined, and a grand jury comprised of our peers and fellow citizens has made a decision. Justice is not often easy. It does not fit the mold of public opinion, and it does not conform to shifting standards. It answers only to the facts and to the law. With this in mind, we must now ask ourselves, where do we go from here?
Where do we go from here? What he just said is that Kentucky law bars us.
When pets were given the choice between paying more with cable TV or paying less for their
Kentucky law bars us from pursuing this any further. And why is the grand jury thing so important? The last thing I'll bring up here in the final 5 minutes we have of the show here. This article entitled "Criminally Yours: Indicting a Ham Sandwich." We've all heard this before. This indicting a ham sandwich came from a New York judge. His name's Saul Walter. He said in 1985 that if a district attorney wanted to, a grand jury would indict a ham sandwich. What he means is that district attorneys have so much power over how grand juries operate that if they wanted to, they could say this ham sandwich committed a crime and probably get them indicted on some crime. Get a ham sandwich, an inanimate object, indicted on a crime. In 22 states, the prosecutor must obtain an indictment before he can proceed with a felony prosecution. Now, while that sounds like a fancy legal term, don't be fooled. Indictments are easy to obtain. Grand juries are the prosecutor's babies. They decide who gets picked, what evidence gets presented, and what gets left out. There's no judge, there's no defense attorney, and generally, a defendant only testifies in rare circumstances. His story is so airtight that there's no downside to putting him in, essentially. There's no necessity at all for unanimity among the 23 or so jurors. And the standard of proof is so low, probable cause. The probable cause standard is so low, probable cause exists to believe a crime has been committed, that anyone, for the merest hint of an offense, can get indicted. The legal standard of burden of proof for a grand jury is probable cause, meaning, again, it should be extremely easy to make some kind of showing that would rise to that level. Presumably, then, a grand jury in the Breonna Taylor case similarly should have been able to find something, anything to indict on, other than just a wanton endangerment charge for shooting into the adjacent apartment. Yet they didn't. And we're meant to believe now, I suppose, by some type of fabricated narrative that has no basis in reality, that the entirety of that grand jury has some kind of racial animus. Did every single member of that grand jury hold some type of contempt, personal contempt for Breonna Taylor? Of course not. It's highly likely, it's much more likely that the law is specifically designed to allow law enforcement officers to do exactly what they just did. That's what I want to focus on. That's where we probably have to end the show here today. In the last 2 minutes, that's all I want to make. The only reason why I went on a 30-minute rant here this morning, if you really want to check it out for yourself, Kentucky Revised Statutes, Section 503.090. It's the use of physical force in law enforcement. Now, I don't think that that is the exact statute that was used to prove or disprove anything in this case. I bring that up and I link it to the show notes just to show you. When I say there's a distinctly different legal standard that law enforcement officers are held to than you or I would be, read through what is justified use of physical force and deadly force. What is justified use of deadly physical force for a law enforcement officer is, I was going to say virtually anything. It's not necessarily true, but it's pretty darn close to virtually any situation. If you don't like that, focus on what the Attorney General said. We are legally barred from moving forward. Do not allow yourself to be distracted by this counter narrative that's about to come up, because it happened with George Floyd and it's happened every single time since. It's been happening every single time in my lifetime. Whenever these things have been brought up, we get so close to having the conversations we need to have, and then we get distracted by something entirely unrelated. We do it to ourselves, man. I'll finish with this. The last minute we have, this book I'm reading through, A Coddling of the American Mind. These neuroscientists do this experiment where they put a bunch of dots on a piece of paper, okay? There's 200 dots on the piece of paper. They get 20 people in a room, and they ask you to guess how many dots are on a piece of paper, and then they arbitrarily define, they break you up into two groups based upon who guessed above or below the exact number of dots. Doesn't matter. Like I said, it's arbitrary. Then they take these two groups and then they put you in an MRI machine and they start showing you images of a finger being pricked that draws blood. And they put an image below it that says, this person whose finger was pricked is in the group of people who guessed below. Alternatively, they say this person whose finger is being pricked was in the group of those that guessed above. And you can actually see in the cortex, for those cortex, there's areas, that things that associate with sympathy or empathy or compassion. If the person is in your group, those register more. If the person is outside of your group, they register less. The point the neuroscientists are making is we are biologically designed to divide amongst ourselves over the most arbitrary things in the world. If we start to focus on the fact of what defines us by race, religion, national origin, sexual orientation, things that actually do matter, how lost will we be, man? How lost will we be? This stuff affects all of us. It affects every single one of us to the core, to the absolute core. And there's ways we can fix it. I promise you there is, but we have to get a united front going forward with this stuff. 9:31, we got to get out. Love each and every one of y'all sincerely. Seriously, spread the message of love, hope, unity, all that today. 9:31, see y'all tomorrow.